Choosing Home by ginnyrules27. Chapter 54. Harriet sighed as the cool breeze from the ocean blew through her hair. It had been 3 years since they brought Sammy's dad from the Isle, and it was the first time where they'd been able to have a date. Just the two of them. Oh, sure, they'd had plenty of double dates. The two of them with Harry and Uma, the two of them with Freddie and Ali, and hell, the two of them with CJ and Ryan, much to the latter's embarrassment. But never a date like this where it was just the two of them. I would have been fine if Sammy's brothers joined us, but they didn't want to leave Mr. Smooth's side, she thought as she took another breath of the salty sea air. She had never thought that she'd be able to sail the open sea like this. She was a pirate, and her father had taught her how to sail, even after he stopped being an actual father and more of a figurehead. But their ships were anchored in Pirates' Cove, unable to sail due to the barrier. This was more than she ever could have dreamed. "Dropping up, Cap'n," Sammy said with a smile. "This looks like a good place to stop for a picnic, and then maybe a spa." "If I ever turn down a spa, Sammy, assume there's something wrong with me," Harriet said with a small chuckle as she turned to look at her girlfriend. There were those in Oregon who thought they were insane for going out with how cold it was. Harriet could only scoff at them. Besides, it meant Sammy got to wear a red scarf that somehow made her look even more gorgeous than she already did. Honestly, how was that fair? The red scarf with the red beanie she'd taken to wearing, and the red mittens Mrs. Potts had made for her. The weird thing was they still hadn't met Mrs. Potts. The winter accessories just showed up in a welcome basket their first winter there, along with a blue scarf, beanie and mittens for Harriet. I will admit, I am perfectly okay with wearing Sammy's colours for a change, Harriet thought as Sammy came to the deck with the picnic. Though she still wasn't sure how Mrs. Potts knew about them, she suspected Ben might have told her, but she wasn't sure. "I have to say, I know it's only been 3 years in Oregon, but I will never get used to how nice the food is in comparison to what it was like when we were growing up," Sammy said with a small sigh. "Me too," Harriet nodded, as she unscrewed the thermos that they had filled with hot chocolate. "At least now any kids who are still on the Isle can get decent food. Though I'd be surprised if there's anyone still there other than the remnants of the Angels and the Casters. And the Gaston twins, if we're only talking BKs," Sammy added. "I honestly don't think they'd make it off the Isle, with how they treated Gil and the Legume girls. I'm just glad Gil was able to be with his mother." Sammy had been true to her word, and asked Ben about bringing the Bimbettes off the Isle as soon as they got back with her father. Ben, to his credit, only seemed slightly conflicted about the matter, and it was understandable. These weren't just VKs who hadn't deserved to be chucked on the Isle and forgotten about, or adults who had done nothing but followed orders. These were women who had made his mother's life horrible in her village, who had stormed his father's castle during Gaston's raid of it. In the end, though, after talking with Gil and the girls, and finding that they did want their mothers in Oregon with them, Ben brought the Bimbettes from the Isle, another branch from Princess Genevieve's confusing family tree. "Claudette really seems to like Macaria," Harriet said. "Why wouldn't she? She's nice, friendly, witty, and, the granddaughter of Zeus." Sammy chuckled. "I'd say it's a safe bet of her liking her son's girlfriend." Harry said she asked Hercules to give Gil the talk." "Macaria?" "No, Claudette." Sammy chuckled. "Oh, God, why would she do that?" "Because Gaston's an idiot and more than likely didn't give it to Gil," Harriet sighed. "Not to mention I'm sure Claudette would rather not be made a grandmother again before Gil's married." "Wouldn't that be Beast's responsibility?" Sammy asked. "Since Belle was Gil's guardian?" "You'd think, but wouldn't you want the talk from Beast or Hercules if you were Gil?" "I see your point, but can we stop talking about this? We're venturing way too deep into Gil's love life for me to be comfortable," Sammy said as the two of them began to dig into the food they'd brought with them. Sammy sighed as she looked over at Harriet. It was hard to believe it had been 3 years since they'd gotten together, and yet she knew it had been longer than that. She'd been the dark-haired girl's first mate for as long as she could remember. She would always be by her side. And now it was time to make that official. Captain?
Yeah, Sammy?
Harriet asked before looking at her best friend and girlfriend in shock as Sammy held a box in her hands.
Sammy, is that?
I meant what I said to you that day 3 years ago. Sammy said, I look at you and I'm home. I never want that feeling to go away, Harriet. And you're the most amazing person in my life. You're loving and caring and the best captain any pirate could ask for, even though I'm sure Harry would disagree with me. I want to stay like this. Forever. I want this to be we. Just you and me. If you can promise me that, Harriet Mila Hook, will you make me the happiest woman alive? Will you marry me? Sammy opened the box to show Harriet the ring inside. It was a single rose gold band, with the top part looking as if it had been twisted the way a piece of rope was. The jewel in the centre was a black diamond. Harriet had to assume. That looked like a teardrop. Lord Hades says it's a fancy black diamond, Sammy said softly as Harriet continued to stare. Please, say something. Anything. Harriet didn't speak, but instead leaned over and met her lips to Sammy's in a tender yet eager kiss.
How could my answer be anything but yes?
She asked as she broke from the kiss.
You're my best mate, my first mate, and probably the love of my life. You've been by my side for as long as I can remember, and until the day comes where I'm escorted to Davy Jones's locker by Lord Hades himself, I will never send you from my side. My only question is, how can I make you the happiest woman alive when you've already done that for me?
Sammy let out a relieved chuckle as she quickly put the ring on Harriet's finger. A perfect fit.
Lord Hades does know what he's doing when it comes to his jewels, doesn't he?
Harriet said with a smile.
And, by the way, forever may be a long time, but it's not long at all, Sammy. Not when I'm with you.
She rested her forehead on her girlfriend's. Sorry, her fiancé's, and smiled.
Harriet and CJ are probably going to flip their lids when they see this ring.
More like Harry's going to be worried that you're expecting him to be next. He's dating Uma now, after all.
You do remember how long it took for him to admit his feelings for Uma, right? Harry's not going to propose until he's comfortable doing so.
Good point. Sammy chuckled. Harriet smiled.
So, you want to maybe see if this boat has quarters for us to hunker down in? I do believe it's starting to snow.
Maybe in a minute, Sammy said, resting her head on Harriet's shoulder. For now, it's just pretty to look at. Besides, I thought you wanted to spar.
Maybe in a minute,
Harriet said as she continued to smile and wrap her arms around Sammy, admiring her ring. It was truly the best treasure she could have asked for. Meanwhile, on the other side of the kingdom, Ginny Gothel was doing the exact same thing, admiring her engagement ring.
Do you like it?
Chad asked as he held her close. Bruno sitting on their feet as the fire roared in the fireplace. I love it, Sammy said. I still can't believe you used your grandmother's engagement ring, Chad. This is a ring for a queen.
And at some point, not soon if the gods are good, you will be my queen, Chad said before kissing the top of her head.
Ginny sighed as she continued to admire her ring. The way the light shined off of the emerald and the surrounding diamonds. Queen Ginny Charming. Ginny Charming. Title or no title, the name sounded better than anything she'd ever imagine. I wonder if our kids will have that curl, she thought as she glanced at a few of Chad's curls, which were falling into his eyes. I hope so. I hope any kids we do have take after Chad, with how good he and his family have been to me.
What are you thinking about? Chad asked.
If our kids will have your curl, she told him, smiling up at him and gently brushing it out of his eyes.
Probably, considering you also have some curl to your hair, he told her. But I don't think we have to worry about that right now. Give it some time.
Ginny smiled slightly. And here I thought you'd be stressing about needing an heir.
First off, I've got 3 younger sisters, Chad told her, as much as I'd love kids with you. If it never happens, I know Charmington will be in good hands. Should Kitty, Lucy or Alex ever have kids of their own, they can be the heir. However, like I said, we don't need to think about that just yet. If Ben's not stressing about an heir, I'm not going to either. Didn't you say there's speculation about whether or not King Ben is human based on how well he rolls with the punches? Okay, maybe I should have said if Akio is not stressing about an heir, seeing as right now his only heir is a snowman. Is it wrong that I find the idea of a snowman ruling a kingdom kinda terrifying? Only if it's wrong that I agree with that sentiment, Chad said with a chuckle. By the way, your sister? Very intimidating. You met Cass? Ginny said with a grin. Cassandra Gothel had been one of the adults brought off the Isle. Though granted, Ben had an easier time getting his council to agree to her release, as Cassandra had voluntarily placed herself on the Isle to watch over Gothel. With her sister off the Isle, Cassandra had welcomed the invite off, and had already regained her friendship with Rapunzel and Eugene. I did. Chad nodded. I asked her for permission. Permission? Like, permission to marry me? Chad nodded. I love you, Jen. And I never want anything to come between us, but I know you love your sister too. The last thing I'd want is to be the cause of you to feel like you had to choose between me and your family. Ginny smiled slightly and kissed his cheek. I love you too, Chad. But you don't have to worry about that. Though I think you won some points with Cass for asking permission. It's antiquated, and honestly no one on the Isle does it. But there's a lot on that Isle that doesn't do. But there's a lot that the Isle doesn't do that Auradon's better for doing. Chad said, and then looked out the window. You know, it looks like the snow's sticking. You want to have a snowball fight with Bruno? As much fun as that sounds, I am quite content to stay right here with you. Ginny smiled as she pulled a blanket from the sofa and draped it over the two of them, with their furry feet warmer. Something tells me we'll have plenty of snowball fights in our future. Ho 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 ho, I'll hold you to that. Chad chuckled. Next time we visit Arendelle and Queen Elsa's visiting, I'm sure Keo could ask her to make some snowballs for us to use. He held her close and kissed the top of her head. How could he ever have thought he'd be alone for the rest of his life? Just because Audrey had shoved him into a closet. Well, technically it was Freddie, but it somehow hurt less when he thought back on it, for Audrey had been the one to do it. For her to just stand by and laugh, when they'd been friends since birth. No, he thought, don't think about that. Not tonight. Not when you're with Ginny. You can talk about that with Dr. Hopper, but don't ruin the moment. It was probably one of the best nights of his life. He wasn't about to ruin it by mentioning Audrey or Freddie. You're thinking again, aren't you? Ginny asked as she looked over at him. Sorry, he chuckled. I'll try not to make it a habit. Ginny smiled and ran her hand over his hair. You don't have to apologize. Not to me, Chad. I know it was rough 3 years ago, but at least now there are things to look forward to. King Ben's wedding. Our wedding? You know, I like the sound of that, Chad said with a smile as he kissed the top of her head. His wedding. He was going to get married. I hope you're prepared to have 3 bridesmaids right off the bat. I think Kitty, Lucy and Alex would be highly offended if you don't pick them. You know, I also have Rap's daughters to choose from, Ginny told him, unless you're comfortable with me having 8 bridesmaids. Why wouldn't I be? Because that means you need 8 groomsmen? Ben, Bobby, Roland, Hattie, Connor, Will, Lee and Amir. Chad rattled off. Ginny juggled. Why Hattie? I didn't think you were that close to Mel's little brother. Because no one else is walking down the aisle of my wedding with my little sister on their arm, Chad said. Hence why Amir would be walking with Rachel. Didn't she get engaged to Aziz a couple of months ago? She sure did, Ginny nodded. Who would the other guys walk with? Bobby with Lucy, Roland with Kitty, Connor with Rowan, Will with Robin, Lee with Rose, and Ben with Ruby. Chad said, I know, Ruby's with one of Mal's crew, but I'm not close enough to him to have him be a groomsman.
Ginny chuckled.
Okay. Any thoughts on who your best man would be? There's only one man for the job, Chad said with a smile. He's always been there for me, even when I was a Class A jerk. He saved me from the closet at Fairy Cottage. And I've known him since birth, so he's practically my brother. It wouldn't be right if Ben wasn't my best man. I'm sure he would be honoured, Ginny said, though I think you might have to rearrange the order of the groomsmen and bridesmaids there. Doesn't the best man walk with the maid of honour? Good point, Chad said, though Ben would really be happy walking with anyone. And do we really need tradition?
Ginny chuckled.
No, I don't think we do.
The rest of the wedding planning could wait. All she wanted to do was enjoy the night that had become one of the best nights of her life. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Oh my god, I loved it! 2 proposals in 1 chapter. Ginny, you are spoiling me. Oh, that was beautiful. Just the way they describe the rings and the way they do it. I like that it was Sammy who proposed to Harriet and not the other way around. Because think about it, if Harriet's the captain, that would mean she would lead. So it's nice to flip it around to have Sammy be the one to do the proposal instead. I love that. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.